If you want to make grading easier for yourself, maybe one route you're taking is doing a lot of participation activities where students either get the points or they don't, depending if they do the activity or not. And so you might be wondering, well, how can I best use these to my advantage and to the student's advantage in the classroom? And so today I'm going to tell you about 5 different ways I use participation activities in the classroom to achieve certain goals. So if that interests you, keep on watching. Hey there, this is Erica from Ever Educating, and this channel is for college instructors or even high school teachers who are looking for tips, tools, ideas, resources for their teaching life. So if that interests you, do go ahead and subscribe below. But again, today we're talking about 5 different ways of using these activities, and the first is to help students understand a larger concept in your classroom. Okay, so in this case, an example, I'll give you an example of each of these 5. An example of this is in my writing and literature course. I had in week 2, we're talking about the ties between literature and culture. So how literature influences culture, how culture influences literature in turn, the cycle of that relationship. So I gave them a discussion forum activity in which they had to find either a commercial or an object or a business, something in the real world that has an allusion, a reference to a literary text to kind of show just how immersed literary texts are in our current culture. And so I showed them a commercial about a watch company that had the white rabbit from Alice in Wonderland running around saying, I'm late, right? But if he had a watch, he wouldn't be, okay? Or a cereal commercial for a honey-flavored kids cereal. And of course, Winnie the Pooh is searching for another snack and comes across this cereal, right? So how can a literary text influence some kind of media object or physical object, etc., etc.? And so again, if they turned it in, then they got the point. If they did it correctly, they found an object that's tied to it. And if they didn't, obviously they get no points. And so in the post, they had to link that thing, right? And then give a brief explanation. Well, what literary text is influencing it, right? What are they alluding to here? What's the connection, okay? And so definitely think of, okay, there's these major concepts in my class that I want to make sure my students are grasping. Have them do a quick activity where they find an example of this concept in the real world and post it. And if they get it right, they get the point. And if they don't, maybe you give them partial credit for trying. But of course, if they don't turn it in, then they get 0 points. So that's way 1 of using these activities. Now keep on watching because these activity types get more and more important as you're teaching. But in the second one, the goal here is to actually have students submit a portion of a larger project to make sure they're understanding the skills needed to complete that project. So in my case, in my composition course, I had my students submit 2 examples of MLA citations of academic journal articles because in each of their papers, they had to have MLA citations in their works cited of academic sources. And so the goal here was just start researching the topic that you're going to write your first paper about. And then the homework assignment was, all right, find 2 articles that you might be using and curate the MLA citation for them. Here's the guide. We went over how to do this in homework in class. I showed you how to actually automate the citation in the database potentially and just edit it from there if there's any issues. So go ahead and find these things and curate them. And so in that way, we have 2 solutions here, right? 2 reasons why this is important. 1, they actually had time to find the articles they're using for their paper, so they have 1 more thing done. And 2, I make sure they actually understand how to do an MLA citation. And if they didn't, then I know that I have to do another lecture or maybe meet with them one-on-one to show them how to do this, right? And so it's something very short that they turned in. It's just the 2 citations. And again, okay, you did it. Great, you get the point. You didn't do it, you don't get the point. And then you might have, half credit, right? Or 3/4 credit if, yes, you turn them in, but they're not fully an MLA citation. You did APA or you did partial MLA, right? So that's another approach to doing it. Think of, okay, small things to submit to make sure they're understanding the skills needed for a later part of the classes. Now, along similar lines, the third type is an activity that motivates students to make stable progress on a piece of work, right? So a larger project. So potentially, I have my students turning in a paper outline next week, but it's specifically in some literary analysis paper, the outline has a very specific structure. You're gonna give me your thesis, and you're going to give me 4 to 6 topic sentences that support that thesis, because you'll need 4 to 6 paragraphs of supportive information to reach the length requirement of this paper that's coming up. Okay, so if they had to do this now, that means they're progressing in the larger project little by little, rather than 3 weeks from now they're writing the whole thing the day before it's due or 3 days before it's due. I have assignments that are requiring work to be put in to give them progress throughout the weeks leading into the deadline. Okay, so a small thing that you can assign every once in a while that ensures that they've made progress because they couldn't complete it without actually working on the larger project. And so again, that's another way of almost like doubling up, like, hey, you have to do the work anyways, get more participation points for actually doing it in a timely manner, right? And so that's another approach as well. It's also a way of giving them formative feedback while they're working on a larger project. So if I see the outline and there's an issue, hey, this thesis won't work for this reason, revise it a bit, right? Or hey, this is all great, but this topic sentence, you want to double check because I think it can be countered by what we've been reading. Okay, so that's another approach as well for formative feedback as well as stable progression in a larger project. If you're liking these ideas, make sure you're clicking that like button and letting me know. But this next one is giving them participation activities that require them to do some type of homework assignment in order to complete the activity. So again, in my case, I'm thinking reading here, right? So if I'm seeing that a lot of students aren't reading because they're not discussing it at all in class, then I might have, okay, you know what? When you do the reading, do this little activity, do this Kahoot game, do this discussion forum, do this little, reading quiz, do something that shows you've actually read the content that we're going to discuss in class, right? So this is more of like pushing students to make sure that they're doing what they need to do at home so that they can succeed in a discussion or an activity that's going to take place during class in the future. So you give them the points, right? Saying, great job, you've got the points for doing this. And that means you've also accomplished the homework as well, which means you can excel in the classwork as well, right? So it's a win-win-win situation here. Okay, so I don't always do these. If my students are obviously really on task and they're having great discussion, I don't need to give this extra homework. But if there is that aspect of, the issue in that class, then I'll add this activity every once in a while to kind of really say, hey, you must be doing this reading in order to succeed in this classroom. Let me help by giving you extra points of participation for completing an activity that connects to it. And the fifth one is all about giving space for your students to get to know each other and for you to get to know your students as well. And so these are community building participation activities. So my first homework assignment every single semester is the same thing. Go to this discussion forum and answer these 2 questions about yourself. What name or nickname do you prefer? What are your pronouns? What's your favorite book if it's a literature course, right? Tell me one interesting fact about you. What do you plan on doing when you finish college, right? So just a few questions that you get to know them, they get to know each other. Oh, hey, that's your hobby? That's mine too. Oh, hey, I love this as well. You want to play this game together, right? So you can create that community building early on. But then you can do that throughout the semester as well. So something that might say, you know what? We're doing this thing about the genre of sci-fi. Maybe I'm going to just do a little post. Hey, you get 1 point by just telling me what your favorite sci-fi book, movie, TV show, whatever is, or why do you hate sci-fi, if it's not your cup of tea. And again, like, hey, you want to be making friends. I'm teaching freshmen, right? You should see the responses here and see what you have in common with your classmates, right? Start friendship building in the class, connecting it to the class topic, and giving them like maybe a half point, something along those lines, for completing those types of activities. Now, if you want more ideas for classroom or homework activities, I have some links below that might prove helpful to you. But again, click like if you found this video helpful, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.